You wake up every morning and the first thing you do is reach for your phone. You scroll endlessly through social media, consume news that makes you anxious, respond to messages that add nothing to your life, and suddenly realize that 2 hours have passed. You get up, go to work at something you secretly suspect is useless to the world, return home exhausted, watch series you'll forget next week, and go to sleep with the feeling that another day has slipped away without real meaning. If this description resonates with your experience, you are not alone. You are experiencing one of the most devastating phenomena of our time: the systematic construction of a world devoid of authentic purpose, a world that is slowly consuming us from within and threatening the very essence of what it means to be human. For the first time in human history, we have created an entire civilization based on perpetual distraction, endless consumption, and the pursuit of instant validation, while fundamental questions about our existence have been pushed to the margins of everyday experience. It is no coincidence that we live amid an epidemic of anxiety, depression, and existential emptiness. We are literally building a world that denies our deepest nature as beings who need meaning to thrive. To understand how we reach this point, we need to look back and recognize that for millennia, human beings found purpose in 3 fundamental pillars: religion, which offered an ordered cosmos and a clear role for each individual within the grand divine plan; community, which provided identity, belonging, and mutual responsibilities; and tradition, which connected each generation to those before and after, creating a sense of continuity and legacy. These 3 pillars were not perfect, often oppressive and limiting, but they offered something our modern era seems incapable of providing: a clear reason to get up in the morning that transcended mere survival or personal gratification. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, while liberating humanity from many superstitions and injustices, also began a process of systematic dismantling of these pillars of meaning without offering adequate substitutes. Science taught us that we are an insignificant species in a vast and indifferent universe, that our existence is the product of evolutionary chance, and that there is no inherent purpose or cosmic plan that justifies our presence here. Modern secularism, while eliminating many religious prejudices, also removed the sense that our lives are part of something greater and more permanent than ourselves. What emerged in place of these ancient systems of meaning was something completely new in human experience: a society organized around perpetual economic growth, material consumption, and the maximization of individual experiences. We were convinced that happiness could be bought, that success is measured in bank account numbers and social media likes, and that life's goal is to accumulate as much pleasure and comfort as possible before dying. This philosophy, though never explicitly declared, permeates every aspect of our institutions, from the educational system that prepares us to be productive consumers, to the media that constantly bombards us with messages about what we should buy, how we should look, and what we should desire. The result is a civilization that produces unprecedented material wealth, but leaves its members spiritually starving and existentially lost. We have never had so much access to information, entertainment, and possibilities, but paradoxically, we have never felt so empty and disoriented. We created a system that keeps us constantly busy but rarely engaged in something we consider truly important. We work jobs we often perceive as meaningless, to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't really like, while fundamental questions about who we are and why we exist remain perpetually unexamined. Digital technology has amplified this crisis of purpose in ways we are only beginning to understand. The algorithms that govern our online experiences were designed to capture and hold our attention, not to help us find meaning or grow as individuals. They feed us content that confirms our biases, that makes us feel superior or outraged, that distracts us from deep or uncomfortable thoughts. The result is that we spend hours each day consuming information that doesn't make us wiser, more compassionate, or more fulfilled, but simply keeps us addicted to the next stimulus. Social media, in particular, has created a perverse form of pseudo-purpose based on constant external validation. We post photos, opinions, and experiences not because they have intrinsic meaning to us, but because we hope to receive approval from an invisible audience. Our self-esteem has become dependent on digital metrics. How many likes, shares, positive comments we receive. This has created a generation of people who live their lives as constant performances, always conscious of how their experiences will appear online, rarely allowing themselves moments of genuine reflection or contemplative silence. Meanwhile, the modern job market has transformed most employment into exercises in Kafkaesque absurdism. Millions of people spend their days in offices producing reports that no one reads, attending meetings about meetings, executing tasks that exist only because the system needs them to exist, not because they add real value to the world. Anthropologist David Graeber called these bullshit jobs positions that the workers themselves recognize as useless, but which are maintained because our economy needs people employed, even in meaningless activities. This lack of purpose in work is particularly devastating because humans have a deep need to feel that their contribution matters, that their effort is building something valuable. When we spend most of our waking hours in activities we perceive as empty, this corrodes our sense of dignity and self-worth. It's no surprise that so many people report feeling like they're wasting their lives, as if they're trapped in an endless routine that leads nowhere. Consumerism offers a temporary solution to this feeling of emptiness, but it's a solution that only worsens the problem in the long term. We buy things to feel better, to express our identity, to appear successful in others' eyes. But the satisfaction we get from purchases is always temporary, always followed by the need for the next product, the next experience, the next upgrade. We created an economy based on making people feel dissatisfied with what they have, perpetually inadequate, constantly needing more to be happy or complete. This infinite pursuit of more not only leaves us spiritually empty, but is also literally destroying the planet we inhabit. An economy of perpetual growth on a finite planet is mathematically impossible, but we continue pretending we can indefinitely expand our resource consumption without facing catastrophic consequences. Climate change, mass species extinction, ocean pollution are all manifestations of this purposeless pursuit of more, always more. The irony is that the more we try to find happiness through consumption and distraction, the emptier we become. Psychological studies consistently show that people who focus on materialistic values tend to be less happy, more anxious, and less satisfied with their lives than those who prioritize relationships, personal growth, and contribution to something greater than themselves. We know this intellectually, but our society continues to be structured to encourage exactly the behaviors we know make us miserable. One of the most disturbing manifestations of this crisis of purpose is what psychologists call functional nihilism. Many people, especially young ones, have developed a life philosophy that essentially says, nothing really matters, so I'll just try to have as much fun as possible and avoid thinking about the future. This nihilism is not the result of deep philosophical contemplation, but a defensive reaction to a world that seems to offer no compelling reasons to care about anything. When we ask people why they do what they do, why they choose certain careers, relationships, or lifestyles, the answers often reveal a frightening absence of deep reflection. It's what's expected. It's what everyone does. I need to pay the bills. That's just how things are, have become the default justifications for fundamental life choices. We've lost the ability to ask basic questions about whether the way we live actually serves us, whether our values are consciously chosen or passively absorbed from the surrounding culture. This existential passivity makes people vulnerable to manipulation by forces that have an interest in keeping them distracted and conformist. Populist politicians thrive in societies where people feel purposeless, offering simple enemies to blame and simplistic solutions to complex problems. Corporations benefit from consumers seeking to fill existential voids with products. Extremists of all stripes find fertile ground among those who feel lost and desperate for some cause to give meaning to their lives. The lack of purpose is also related to the alarming decline in mental health, especially among young people. Rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide have increased dramatically in recent decades, precisely during the period when material life has improved for most people in the developed world. This suggests that it's not the lack of physical comfort that's making us suffer, but the lack of spiritual and existential meaning. Young people, in particular, are growing up in a world that offers them infinite possibilities for career and lifestyle, but little guidance on how to choose among them in ways that lead to a satisfying life. They are constantly bombarded with messages about following their dreams and doing what makes them happy, but rarely receive practical tools for discovering what this means or how to balance personal desires. With responsibilities to others and to the future, modern education, unfortunately, contributes to this problem by focusing almost exclusively on developing technical skills and preparing for the job market, completely neglecting fundamental questions about how to live a good and meaningful life. Students spend years learning facts and procedures, but are rarely encouraged to reflect on their values, purposes, or what kind of person they want to become. They graduate with degrees, but without a philosophy of life to guide them through the difficult choices they will face. Family and community which historically provided support structures and value systems, have also been weakened by modernity. Many people live isolated, far from family and neighbors, depending primarily on superficial and temporary relationships for emotional support. Geographic mobility, while offering opportunities, also uproots people from the community contexts that traditionally gave meaning to their lives. At the same time, we witness the emergence of poor substitutes for authentic purpose. Celebrity culture offers figures to admire and imitate, but these figures often represent the very superficial values that contribute to the crisis of meaning. Online activism allows people to feel they're making a difference in the world just by sharing posts or signing petitions, without engaging in the difficult and sustained work necessary for real change. Workaholism disguises itself as purpose when people define themselves entirely through their careers, often at the expense of health, relationships, and well-being. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that the lack of purpose is not just a personal problem, but a threat to the stability and progress of civilization as a whole. Societies composed of individuals without clear direction or commitment to shared values become vulnerable to extreme polarization, social conflict, and institutional collapse. When people don't believe their actions matter or that the future is worth protecting, they stop making the sacrifices necessary to keep a complex society functioning. We see this happening around us. Reluctance to address climate change because it requires short-term sacrifices for long-term benefits. Extreme political polarization because people without their own purpose find identity in tribal hostility. Decline in civic participation because individuals focused only on personal gratification don't see value in contributing to the common good. I need to stop for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this lack of purpose in our society most resonates with your own experience? Do you recognize yourself in this description of lives lived on autopilot, constantly seeking distractions to avoid confronting fundamental questions about meaning and direction? I know we often avoid thinking deeply about these issues because it can be uncomfortable to acknowledge how lost we might be, but your honest reflection is valuable not just for you, but for all of us navigating this complex territory. Share in the comments, I feel lack of purpose when. Your experience can help others realize they're not alone in this search for meaning in a world that often seems designed to distract us from it. But recognizing the problem is just the first step. The crucial question is, how can we begin to rebuild meaning and purpose in our lives and in our society? The answer is not in returning to old forms of social organization that no longer serve our current needs, but in consciously creating new forms of meaning that are adequate to the realities of the modern world. First, we need to develop what we might call existential literacy, the ability to consciously examine our values, question our assumptions, and make deliberate choices about how we want to live. This means setting aside regular time for deep reflection, away from the constant distractions of digital life. It means asking difficult questions. What do I really value? What kind of person do I want to be? How can I contribute to something greater than myself? What legacy do I want to leave? Second, we need to reconnect with what psychologists call intrinsic values, those that come from within and contribute to our genuine well-being, as opposed to extrinsic values that are imposed by society and often leave us empty. Deep relationships, personal growth, creativity, contribution to community, connection with nature are examples of intrinsic values that consistently lead to satisfaction and meaning. Third, we need to reimagine work in ways that allow more space for activities we consider meaningful. This might mean structural changes like shorter work weeks, universal basic income, or new models of business organization that prioritize purpose beyond profit. On a personal level, it means seeking ways to align our work with our values, or finding ways to contribute meaningfully to the world through activities outside traditional employment. Fourth, we need to rebuild real communities, not just virtual ones. Humans are social animals who find meaning through deep connections and mutual responsibilities. This might mean investing in local relationships, participating in civic organizations, creating or joining groups based on shared interests or common values. Technology can facilitate these connections, but it cannot replace them. Fifth, we need to develop a new relationship with time and the concept of progress. Modern culture teaches us to value speed, efficiency, and constant growth, but a meaningful life often requires slowness, contemplation, and appreciation of what we already have. We need to learn to value depth over breadth, quality over quantity, being over having. Sixth, we need to confront our mortality in a constructive way. One of the reasons so many people feel purposeless is that they live as if they were immortal, indefinitely postponing questions about what really matters. Recognizing our finitude can be liberating, helping us prioritize what is truly important and live with greater intention and appropriate urgency. Seventh, we need to find ways to contribute to causes that transcend our individual existence. This might be through conscious parenting, environmental work, social justice, advancing knowledge, artistic creation, or any activity that leaves the world a little better than we found it. The feeling of building something lasting is fundamental to human well-being. Eighth, we need to develop contemplative practices that help us navigate the internal complexity of human existence. This might include meditation, prayer, reflective writing, therapy, philosophy, or any practice that promotes self-knowledge and wisdom. In a world that constantly bombards us with external stimuli, creating spaces for internal reflection becomes even more crucial. Ninth, we need to educate future generations not just to be economically productive, but to be reflective and ethical human beings. This means including philosophy, ethics, psychology, and emotional education in basic curricula. It means teaching young people to ask deep questions about life and giving them tools to find their own answers. 10th, we need to create cultural narratives that celebrate depth, contemplation, and contribution instead of just material success and superficial fame. This means supporting art, literature, journalism, and entertainment that explore deep existential themes and model healthy ways of living. It means resisting the commercialization of all aspects of human experience. The transformation I'm describing is not just individual, but cultural and structural. It requires us to question fundamental assumptions about how our society is organized and to have the courage to experiment with new ways of living together. This doesn't mean abandoning all the benefits of modernity, but rather integrating the technological and material advances we've achieved with ancestral wisdom about what makes life worth living. The challenge is immense because we are essentially trying to change the direction of a very large ship in motion. The forces that promote consumerism, distraction, and superficiality are powerful and well-funded. They benefit from keeping us divided, distracted, and focused on short-term satisfaction. Resisting these forces requires discipline, community, and a clear vision of the kind of life and society we want to create. But there are reasons for optimism. More and more people are realizing that something is fundamentally wrong with the way we are living. Movements toward simpler lifestyles, meaningful work, community connections, and contemplative practices are growing. Young people especially are questioning the materialistic values of previous generations and seeking alternative ways to define success and happiness. Technology, while part of the problem, can also be part of the solution if used consciously. Digital tools can facilitate meaningful connections, democratize access to education and information, and enable innovative forms of social and economic organization. The key is developing a more intentional and selective relationship with technology, using it to serve our deeper values instead of allowing it to use us. The crisis of purpose we face is not merely a social or psychological problem, but an evolutionary crisis. We have reached a point in our history where the structures and instincts that brought us here are no longer adequate for the challenges we face. We need to evolve consciously, develop new capacities for wisdom, compassion, and cooperation that allow us to create a world that serves not just our survival, but the flourishing of all beings. This evolution will not happen automatically. It requires conscious effort from millions of individuals who choose to live more intentionally and work together to create systematic change. Each person who decides to deeply examine their life, question dominant cultural values, and seek more meaningful ways of existing contributes to this greater transformation. Human history can be seen as a series of awakenings. The awakening of consciousness, the awakening of language, the awakening of agriculture, the awakening of science. Now we face the need for another awakening. The awakening to conscious purpose, the ability to create meaning intentionally in a universe that doesn't offer us ready-made answers. This awakening is not only possible but necessary for our long-term survival as a species. The same capacities that allowed us to create incredible technologies and complex societies can allow us to create lives rich in meaning and purpose. But this requires that we stop living on autopilot and begin consciously piloting our individual and collective existences. The current moment, however challenging, also represents a unique opportunity in human history. For the first time, we have enough knowledge about psychology, society, and human nature to consciously create cultures that promote genuine flourishing. We have technologies that can facilitate connection and collaboration on previously impossible scales. We have sufficient material resources to ensure everyone's basic needs are met, freeing energy for higher pursuits. What's lacking are not tools or resources, but collective will to use these gifts to create something better than the consumerist and purposeless civilization we inherited. This will must begin with each individual who decides their life can and should mean more than a sequence of distractions between birth and death. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you are not alone. By subscribing to this channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the existential challenges of our time. Each week, we gather here to explore together the big questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways to live amid the transformations we're witnessing. This is not just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this continuous journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. The choice lies before us. We can continue building a world that leaves us empty and desperate, or we can begin consciously working to create something that honors our deepest humanity. The future is not something that happens to us, but something we create through our daily choices, small and large. And each choice we make toward greater consciousness, connection, and purpose is a vote for the kind of world we want to bequeath to future generations.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Alex Gardels. I am the director of Studio B. Tonight we have a wonderful program for you. And I'm going to hand it off to my lovely colleague, Natalia Ramos, to give a slight introduction.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So at the Berggruen Institute, we like to say that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. But we also believe that in order to have real impact, that idea needs a story. And so that's why we started Studio B, to bring together the thinkers, the scientists, the philosophers, the technologists, with the greatest storytellers of our time. Because at this moment of planetary scale transformation, getting the story right is more important than ever. So thank you all for being here, and I'm now going to pass it over to our founder, Nicholas.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Nicholas Berggruen, Berggruen Institute. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Studio B. Thank you, everyone at the Berggruen Institute. And most importantly, thank you, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Yuval Harari. Frankly, they don't need an introduction. I think you know who Joseph is. He is, in some ways, one of yours, meaning he is LA, Hollywood. He is he's behind and in front of the camera, and he's been engaged intellectually on the issues that we care about at the Institute. One of those issues is who are we becoming, who do we want to be, humans, in an age where we can, in theory, change our own nature, transform ourselves through gene editing, AI, quantum computing. And no one has maybe put this into perspective like Yuval Harari. And Yuval wrote a new book, Nexus, which is powerful and, frankly, incredibly timely, because his vision, I think, has been that we've created our lives, our civilizations, from narratives. And we humans have really driven those narratives. But now with AI, it could be that the narrative is driven beyond us, even though in theory it came from us. So we could lose control if we ever had it, but we could really lose the narrative that we are potentially unleashing. So let's hear about it tonight, and thank you again.
Hey everybody, what's going on?
Missing endangered adult. It's an endangered adult. AI. Endangered adults. AI.
Did that feel like a movie moment or what? Is that? Jesus. All right. I'm really, really excited to be here. Thank you to Nicholas and everyone at the Gruen Institute, Studio B. I am an enormous fan of this man's writing here, Mr. Yuval Harari. Ladies and gentlemen, can we hear it for him? He's written a new book called Nexus. I want to talk to you about that tonight, of course. Now, you're on a book tour. I'm sure you're talking about this book a lot and maybe saying some of the same things over and over again. I've never experienced that before myself, having to say the same things over and over again, promoting a piece of media. Watch Killer Heat, released on Amazon today. Prime Video. So I'm going to try to come at this conversation and let you say some of the things you want to say to everybody, but also maybe come at it from a perspective that's unique to this time and place. We're here in Los Angeles, which is sort of the epicenter of the film and television industry. I've worked in film and television my entire life. And a lot of your book is about storytelling. I love to consider myself a storyteller. As an actor and a filmmaker, it's something that I think of as more than a job. I connect to it on maybe an existential level, on who I am. And one thing I often like to say even is that storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human. So one of the first things I wanted to ask you, you wrote a book about humans called Sapiens. How many people have read Sapiens here? Yeah. So as an expert on the history and the prehistory of what humans are, I'm curious to hear what you think of that statement. If I say storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
this is the this is the source of our power. We control the world because we can cooperate in much larger numbers than any other animal. And the secret of cooperation of humans is stories. I mean, you can't get to know more than 100 or 200 individuals, but the same story can be known to millions and even billions of people. And as long as everybody believes the same story, they can cooperate. They can agree on norms and values and so forth. And maybe to just throw just give one or two examples. If you think about the most famous face in history, the most famous portrait in history. So this is the face of Jesus. That over 2,000 years, more portraits of Jesus have been created than probably of any other person in history. And they are everywhere. in churches, in cathedrals, in houses, in schools, in government ministries, at least in some countries. And 100% of these portraits are fictional. Not a single one is authentic, because nobody has any idea how Jesus actually looked like. There is not a single portrait or statue made during his lifetime that has survived. The earliest portrait we have is from about 200 years after his death, and it shows a man crucified on a cross with the head of a donkey, because it was a graffiti drawn by anti-Christians who made fun of this new strange cult. In the Bible itself, there is not a single word about how the man looked like. There is one description of his clothes, but nothing about him, whether he was tall or short or thin or fat or black hair or bald or blonde, nothing. Everything is just fictions. And yet, these fictions have enabled billions of people to work together, whether for good purposes, like charities and building hospitals and whatever, or whether for fighting holy wars and launching inquisitions. But it all runs on stories. And religion is an easy example, but perhaps the most important or successful example is money.
You're saying that money is a story.
It's just like, what else can it be? I mean, it has no objective value. You can't eat or drink dollars. The most successful storytellers in the world are not the people who win the Nobel Prize in literature. It's the people who win the Nobel Prize in economics. And one last thought, if you think about the United States today, maybe the last story that still holds this place together is the dollar. It's the only thing that Republicans and Democrats can still agree on is the value of a dollar. Everything else is like they have very different views.
So this gets at one of the things I found fascinating in the book, that you define stories not only by the content of that story, but the network of people that are connected by that story. You mentioned Republicans and Democrats, you mentioned Christians. Every story, especially any story of any popularity, it defines a certain network. Can you say more? Because that was a new concept to me.
Again, I mean, the way that Nexus tries to understand history is not the history of religions, cultures, wars, kings, but how information flows in the world and the networks of information that create the world. So to give one example, we tend to think about democracy and dictatorship as two contrasting types of ethical systems, of political systems. They have different ideals, different values, and which is true, but you can, on a more fundamental level, you can look at them as different information networks. Information simply flows differently in a dictatorship and in a democracy. A dictatorship is a network in which all the information flows to one hub, where all the decisions are being made. Whereas democracy is a system in which information, if dictatorship is a centralized information system, democracy is a distributed or decentralized system. Well, yes, some information flows to the center, let's say to Washington, where some decisions are being made, but most decisions are made elsewhere. Like if you look at the United States over the last century, so a lot of extremely important decisions were made here in Hollywood. And the influence of the people in Washington on what's happening in Hollywood, it's an open debate. Who influenced more whom? Was it Washington influencing Hollywood or vice versa? In the Soviet Union, there is no debate. I mean, the people in the center tell, Stalin is telling Eisenstein what to film. There is no debate. You do the wrong thing, you go to the gulag. Even if you do the right thing, you might go to the gulag. So that's the difference in how information flows between democracies and dictatorships, and I guess we'll get to that, but one of the biggest questions about AI is what will it do to these contrasting types of information flows, because in the 20th century, the US defeated the USSR ultimately because centralized information processing was inefficient. when all information about everything, economics, culture, the film industry, producing cars, all the information flowed to Moscow, and there are some bureaucrats needed to make decisions, they couldn't do it. They were overwhelmed by the amount of information and either made no decisions or bad decisions. Whereas the distributed system of the United States, it functioned much more efficiently. But what happens if you replace humans with AIs? Humans are overwhelmed by too much information. AIs become more efficient when you flood them with information. Again, it's an open debate. We still don't know the answer, but there is at least one school of thought that argues that AI will make centralized information systems more efficient, and the main problem of totalitarian and centralized system in the 20th century will become their big advantage, which we even see to some extent in the economic realm, that these huge high-tech monopolies that just monopolize entire sections of the economy, because size matters when you have this kind of technology.
Yeah. I want to get to AI. This is something I'm deeply fascinated with. I know a lot of you are too. I also want to get to what you just said about whether Hollywood or Washington is making more decisions, because we love to think that we're important here in Hollywood.
You are.
Before we do, I just want to cover one of the pieces of vocabulary that I found the most useful in your book that I want to go back to a few times as we talk tonight. And again, I think this is sort of empowering and flattering if you're a storyteller. You say in the book that stories can even create a new level of reality. And you talk about 3 different versions of reality, if you will. Objective reality, subjective reality, and intersubjective reality. Can you explain what you mean by those terms?
Yeah, so objective reality is things that exist whether you believe in them or not, whether you know about them or not. If an asteroid from outer space is now coming towards us, about to hit Earth and destroy human civilization, it exists whether people know about it or not. And similarly, viruses killed people, billions of people, long before anybody knew viruses exist. It doesn't matter if you believe in them or not, they can kill you. This is objective reality. Then you have subjective reality, which is reality in the mind of a single person. It depends on the consciousness, on the awareness of a single person. So if you feel pain, nobody else in the world feels this pain. Your doctor, your family can tell you, oh, there is nothing wrong with you. But if you feel the pain, it's still there. This is subjective reality. Now, intersubjective reality, this is something that didn't exist for, as far as we know, for most of the history of the universe. There were only objective and subjective realities. That's it. And stories were important for the appearance in the last few tens of thousands of years, at least in our species, of a new type of reality, intersubjective reality. Things that exist in the interaction between many consciousnesses, between many minds, that they often exist on the level of story, and we already mentioned some of them. Money is maybe the most important type of intersubjective reality. It's not objective. A dollar has no objective value in the sense that you can eat it or drink it or make something out of it. If you're a billionaire and you fly in your private jet with, I don't know, $1 billion, and you crash on a deserted island inhabited only by, I don't know, monkeys and rats and whatever, your dollars are worthless. You cannot buy anything from the monkeys. You cannot make them build a raft for you. You still have maybe the papers, or you can show them on your smartphone to the monkeys. Look, I have $1 billion in my bank account. Just build this raft or give me these bananas. I'll give you as much as you want. It won't help. They are simply unaware of the existence of this reality. Now, if you crash on a lonely island with a cargo of bananas, you can eat them. If you crash with a cargo of, I don't know, hammers, you can use them to try and build a raft. But the most worthless thing to crash on a lonely island with is money. There's nothing to do with it. But if you have other people there, and they believe the same story as you, it works. But again, it's fragile. Intersubjective realities are fragile because people can lose faith in it. Again, it happens to gods, that some gods were once the most powerful intersubjective realities in the world, and now nobody believes in them, and they are gone. And the same thing happens to money. And it's, going back, say, to the dollar, it's now interesting to see what might happen if some people lose faith in this intersubjective reality and instead put their faith in another one like the Bitcoin. So the same way that we had wars of religion in previous eras, now we might have, just imagine trying to run a society when different people just reject the money of the other group. No, ours is better.
So one of the most powerful tools to create an intersubjective reality in our time is film and television. And again, here we are in LA. Lots of us work making film and television. I'm curious just to dive in a little bit. You don't talk about Hollywood film and TV too much in your book, but because we're here, I'm curious to just ask you about it. We're also, by the way, here at the house where the horse head scene was shot from The Godfather, which, come on, yeah, The Godfather. I'm curious to hear from you, from a historical perspective, how did film and TV change storytelling compared to the technologies that existed before film and TV, do you think?
So film and TV are, of course, not alone. They are part of the package of modern information technology. And the changes were enormous. Again, going back to one salient example, if you think about the history of democracy, so for most of history, large-scale democracies were simply impossible. There was no way to create a large-scale democracy because democracy is a conversation. And in a Stone Age tribe, you want to have a conversation between all tribe members. It's relatively easy. They can all come together and talk. But as human societies became bigger and bigger, it became more and more difficult to bring everybody together to the town square or to the same place to have a conversation. So we don't know of any large-scale democracy in ancient times. All the examples, like Athens or Rome, or city-states, or even smaller tribes and towns. We begin to see large-scale democracies only in the late modern era, with the rise of modern information technologies. First, the newspaper, and then telegraph and radio and television and film, and finally the internet. This is when you begin to see large-scale democracies because you can use these technologies to create a conversation in real time between millions of people. People spread over entire continents and they all watch the same news on television, the same TV series, the same movie at the same time, so they can connect in a way that was just impossible before. And this was the foundation of modern large-scale democracy. And again, we'll get to that later, but the new information technologies of the present era, like social media and AI, they are destabilizing democracy for this reason, because democracy is built on top of information technology, so it's not hard to see why a major change in information technology will create an earthquake in the structure built on top of it, which is democracy. But the last thing I'll say is that every technology has many different usages. Also, modern totalitarian regimes are built on the same technology. There were no totalitarian regimes in the ancient world, large-scale totalitarian regimes. Totalitarian regimes are regimes that try to control everybody all the time, everything you do. In the ancient world, you have many monarchies and autocracies, but most of the time, the emperor in Rome, he collects taxes and he directs the armies, but he doesn't try to manage the life of every individual in every village on a day-to-day basis, because this is simply impossible. you begin to see it at the same large-scale totalitarianism at the same time as large-scale democracy because it relies on the same technology. I mean, the Soviets, for instance, I mean, at the same time that Hollywood is established,
Right.
You also see the flowering of the Soviet film industry, and the Soviets were masters, at least in the beginning, of the art of filmmaking.
Eisenstein.
Yeah. And they use the same technology to create a totalitarian regime that everybody from, you know, the Pacific Ocean to the Baltic Sea would watch the same movies, and all the movies are giving the same narrative, the same messages directed from the center.
The Nazis were also brilliant filmmakers.
Exactly.
Leni Riefenstahl, and yeah. You were touching on it, but that's the next place I wanted to go is, okay, so if film and television changed the intersubjective realities and changed the way that networks can form, let's move to the dominant media technology for the last couple decades, because sadly enough, that's not film and TV. Not that film and TV did such a great job, but the dominant technology now has been social media. So I'm curious to ask you the same question that I asked about film and TV. With the rise of social media, how did that change what networks could form, what intersubjective realities could be created, and how humans behaved and thought?
Well, it had immense impact. I mean, just think about the numbers. You have billions of people spending hours every day on this. It is bound to have a tremendous impact. And it creates new ways to form networks, to organize people, which again has a profound impact on society. And it had positive influence and also negative influence. I'll talk a little about the positive influence. I tend to talk a lot about the negativities, but maybe start with the positive influence of social media. The example I like best is from my own personal life. I met my husband, Itzik, 22 years ago in one of the first social media websites for gay people in Israel. And the thing about, for instance, social media in the gay community is that over history you have two types of minorities. You have, again, in terms of information networks, you have concentrated minorities and you have dispersed minorities. So Jews, for instance, are a concentrated minority. Even if they say in a particular country are just 1% of the population, they are concentrated in particular communities, neighborhoods. So usually a Jewish boy would be born into a Jewish family in a Jewish neighborhood. So finding other Jews isn't a problem. You're surrounded by them, even though you're just 1% of the population.
As a native Angelino, I can confirm that this is true.
But a gay boy is usually not born into a gay family in a gay neighborhood. And being born gay in Israel in the 1970s and growing up in the 1980s and 1990s in what was a very homophobic society, like the first issue is, how do you find anybody else? I mean, I didn't know anybody who was out, certainly not in my town. I saw, again, this goes back to film and television, like the first time I saw gay people was on the screen.
What show was it, or movie, do you remember?
There was this British series, Are You Being Served? With, what's his name?
I don't know it. Wow.
Really?
Okay, yeah, no.
Mr. Humphreys. So, and there was one film that I saw later in the 90s, Lilies, by a Canadian director, I think.
What's it called?
Lilies.
Lilies.
It wasn't very famous, but he had a tremendous impact on my life.
Great, yeah.
Like, I remember going to see this movie and coming out of the movie theater and telling myself, you're gay.
Wow.
This was really, it had a huge impact on my life. But you know, you see a gay person on television, you can't reach out to them. And you don't know who else in my town now sees the same movie or the same series and feels the same as me. It's only one directional. But then social media, the internet came, and social media came, and you can interact suddenly through the screen. So what was kind of maybe the biggest hurdle ever? How do you find the others? Suddenly it becomes very, very easy.
All right, that's the positive side.
That's the positive side.
But
There are also negativities. I mean, as you may have noticed, we now have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and we can't talk to each other anymore. And certainly we can't listen to each other. I said earlier that democracy is a conversation, and the conversation is breaking down all over the world. I mean, every country has its own special explanations why Republicans and Democrats can't hold a reasoned conversation anymore. And you have all these explanations about American history and society and whatever. But then you go to Brazil, it's the same thing. You go to Israel, it's the same thing. I even was in Canada 2 weeks ago. I thought this was the same place. They tell me, no, it's the same in Canada. And what's happening? And it's not like the ideological divides today are much worse than they were, let's say, in the 60s. The ideological divides in the 60s were actually much, much bigger. The issues like the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, even the violence, at least up till now, was much worse in terms of assassinations and riots and so forth. But nevertheless, people could still hold a conversation, agree on some basic facts like who won the last elections, and have bipartisan laws. So why is it breaking down all over the world? And the best answer so far that we know about is social media. Again, this basic information technology underlying the whole structure, it's now creating an earthquake. And the mechanism by now is quite well understood. I mean, 10 years ago, it was not well understood, unfortunately. Now we know what's wrong. We still fail to fix it, but at least we know what's wrong. And this is very important because this is kind of the first major impact of AI on history. Because social media is managed not by human beings, it's managed by algorithms, AIs. And again, this is very interesting because one of the first jobs which was automated was not taxi drivers, and it was not textile workers, it was media editors, news editors. You know, in the 19th and 20th century, being an editor of a major media or news organization was an immensely powerful position. You shaped the conversation. You decided what people would be talking about. Some of the most powerful figures in modern history, they began as editors. Lenin's only job before he became Soviet dictator was editor of the newspaper Iskra.
I did not know that. That's funny.
Benito Mussolini was a journalist. Then he was editor of Avanti, I think was the name of the newspaper. And then he was promoted from editor of Avanti to dictator of Italy.
Mussolini and Lenin both?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
You know, if you look at the French Revolution, Jean-Paul Marat shaped the French Revolution by editing the major newspaper of Paris in those days, L'Ami des Peuples, the friend of the people. And now this job has been given to algorithms. Who is the editor of the Facebook newsfeed? Who is the editor of TikTok? Who is the editor of Twitter? An algorithm, a non-human intelligence. And these AIs, these algorithms, they were given by their human masters a seemingly benign task, goal: increase user engagement. Engagement, sounds good to be engaged, no? And the reason was obvious. I mean, business model. The more time people are engaged on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter, the more time they spend on the platform, the more they share and so forth, the more advertisements you can show them, and the more data you can collect about them and sell it to a third party or use it to produce even more powerful algorithms and AIs. So the business model of most social media try to keep people glued to the screen as much as possible. And this was the task given to the editors of these places. increase user engagement. And the algorithms experimented on millions, actually billions of human guinea pigs, and they made a discovery, which was actually also made by philosophers and politicians thousands of years ago, but now the AIs discovered it also, that the easiest way to increase user engagement is outrage, or greed, or fear, or hate. If you press the greed button, or the hate button, or the fear button in a human's mind, you grab their attention. You get them glued to the screen. And this is what they did. They flooded the information market with more and more outrage and greed and fear, with fake news and conspiracy theories, and the conversation broke down. And this was very, very primitive AIs. This was like, you know, long before ChatGPT, which is also quite primitive compared to what's coming. But even this, when people talk about, you know, this kind of future fears about AIs, it's not in the future, it's already in the past. If you look at the impact of these very primitive AIs on democracies all over the world, on societies all over the world, it's not too early to worry about the impact of AI. It's too late in many ways.
One thing I would just compliment what you're saying with is that it is true that the algorithms, as you put it, sort of discovered that the best way to maximize engagement was outrage, fear, extremism, etc. What's harder to describe with language is the algorithm doesn't know that exactly. I don't think.
No, they are not conscious, not at all.
The algorithm is not like a person saying, there's greed, there's hate, I know, I'll put more hate and greed in the feed. It's not like that. It's just a cold and dumb pattern matching calculation.
It's cold and smart. No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's a fair segue. Cold and dumb to cold and smart. We've talked about film and TV. Now we've talked about social media. Now I want to talk about what's coming next. We all, I think, are kind of aware we're at the very beginning of some very big changes that are coming fast and furious our way because of the rapidly emerging technology known as AI. I want to, through the same, your book, you say so many different things about AI, and I want to just narrow it down to, again, because we're kind of coming at this conversation through the lens of storytelling, to start there. How do you think AI will change storytelling from what it used to be?
Well, as we said earlier, stories are some of the most powerful technologies in history. Whether it's the story of Jesus or whether it's the story of money, this is really the foundation of human civilization, is stories. Everything else is built on top of it. And for tens of thousands of years, the only entities on this planet that could create stories, either create new stories or elaborate and interpret old stories, were human beings. Only the human mind was capable of doing it. And now we have on this planet another entity which is capable of spreading and interpreting and ultimately creating stories. It's not conscious, at least not yet, at least as far as we know. At least my position is you don't need consciousness to do these things. You need intelligence. Intelligence and consciousness are different things. Intelligence is the ability to attain goals, to solve problems. Consciousness is the ability to feel things, pain and pleasure, love and hate. We tend to confuse them because in humans and also in other mammals and animals, consciousness and intelligence go together. We solve problems through our feelings. But AI and computers, they are very different. As far as we know, they have no consciousness, they don't feel anything, but they are highly intelligent, at least in some fields. And again, if you think about storytelling, so now the ability of AIs to compose stories, to write texts and create images and create music is really astounding. You know, people say, yes, it's still not as good as the best humans, but it's already better than many humans, or people would say than the average human even. And it's only the beginning, it's nothing, it's just 10 years since the AI revolution began. We haven't seen anything yet. And when I read, for instance, a story composed by AI, what strikes me the most, you can say, oh, it's not good because of this or that, it lacks this, but it's really a story. It's held together by some coherent ideas, motifs. It's not just some kind of glorified autocomplete that it just strings words together randomly, or it takes bits and pieces of sentences from here and there and put them together. No, there is actually a logic to the story. So even if it's not as good as the best human storytellers in 2024, where will it be in 2034 or 44? And again, stories are not just mythological stories, or poems, or theater plays, or movies. Money is also a story. So these things are going to create new financial devices also. Finance is one of the most creative things of all. If you think about human creativity, so think money, checks, ETFs, CDOs, all these things extremely creative. And they are increasingly we are going to see new financial devices created by a non-human intelligence. And for tens of thousands of years, we lived cocooned inside a human culture. Like our lives are shaped by all these stories and artifacts that other humans created. Again, from the holy books, the Bible and the Quran and the Vedas, to the songs and the music and the theater and the movies and the artifacts, the chair, the shoes, everything. This cultural cocoon made by humans. What does it mean? Before we get to the question, is it good, is it bad, is it dangerous? Just leave aside for a moment the judgment. Just think about what would it mean for human beings to live inside a world woven to a large extent by an alien intelligence. Alien not in the sense that it's coming from outer space. Alien in the sense that it creates in a very different way than the human mind. And this, I think, is the biggest question that we are facing, certainly in Hollywood, kind of the center, the epicenter of human storytelling, but all over the world.
So here is probably the only thing in the book that I don't think I agree with exactly.
That's
and so,
good.
Yeah, so I would love to hash this out with you a bit.
Yeah.
Describing AI as alien intelligence. Clearly, you're not talking about an alien from outer space. I understand, but you also in the book even do use the word God. You say perhaps this is these are entities that could be seen as some kind of new gods. Mm-hmm. So I tend to feel like describing this technology in terms like alien, God, the personification or the deification of these computer systems, I'm worried that that story could do more harm than good. And I have some reasons why, but before I get to them, I would just want to start by asking, so you very decisively decided in your book to describe this technology in these terms, alien, God. Tell me about your thought process. Why did you decide to describe the technology in those terms?
I mean, it's basically a PR strategy. How do you present it to the public? And yes, I mean, it demands a lot of thought. Is it a good PR strategy or not in terms of the results? And one reason I chose to go in the alien direction is because I see too much of the discussion gets bogged down in the idea that AI is trying to reach human-level intelligence. And that the very definition, what is AI? It's the moment when computers are somehow equivalent to humans. And I think this is completely misleading.
I very much agree with that.
That AI is not progressing towards human-level intelligence, just as airplanes are not trying to reach bird-level flight.
Yeah.
They are just doing their own thing, which is completely different from birds. And that's also what I think about computers and AIs. They are doing their own intelligent thing, which is completely different from the human intelligence. And this is one reason that I chose the kind of term alien to describe
I think
it.
that's a great reason. I also find it counterproductive when AI is described in these kinds of terms. Is it approaching human level intelligence? They throw around this term AGI, artificial general intelligence, and they define it quickly as once it approaches human level intelligence. I agree. I don't think that's helpful either. I'll tell you one of the reasons why I am concerned with describing this technology and sort of personifying it or deifying it. And that is a little bit about how the tech actually works and is built. I'm obviously not an engineer, but I've learned enough about this. The way that these models are built is they take enormous sets of data. They input that data into an algorithm, a sort of a black box that they frankly don't even totally understand, and it spits out outputs of value. Now, where did all that data come from that was input into the model? It came from humans. Humans generated that data. So my concern about describing it as alien or godlike is it feels distinct from, separate from humans. It feels like it helps to hide the reality of how these models really work. Because, by the way, I think a lot of these tech companies, maybe not all of them, CEO of Stability is in the house, and they're working on, what are they called, sanitized data sets, which I really appreciate, actually getting the licenses of the data sets that they're using to train these models. But I think a lot of these labs, they're not doing that. What they're doing is stealing a bunch of data from people who deserve the right to, I think, own the data that they created. And they're not disclosing what data went into these models. When they are asked, they won't say. They're getting sued left and right because of this. To me, this is a really central problem that we absolutely need to solve as soon as possible for a lot of reasons that I want to get into. One of those problems is economic. We in the film and television industry are going to feel it maybe first. But I don't think it's limited to Hollywood. I think so many industries, whether it's doctors or architects, designers, logistics operators, anybody who's working at a computer, and once there's robots, really anybody that's doing almost any work is going to have their livelihood threatened. And these tech companies are going to try to say, oh, well, we invented a god. It can just do your job. When in reality, what they did was they stole everybody's data, crunched up the numbers, and generated those outputs. Without the human-generated data, their products are 100% useless, have no value at all. And so one of my concerns with describing this technology in terms of gods or aliens or anything that sort of personifies it or turns it into a creature, a thing on its own that exists independently of the human input that made it, is that it helps these tech companies hide where their products really come from. And where they really came from is humans. Okay.
So I agree. I mean, I think that the main issue is whether we focus on the input or on the output. I completely agree with what you describe. I think about it that, you know, AI is basically eating the whole of human culture that we've produced over tens of thousands of years, you know, from the cave paintings of tens of thousands of years ago to the movies of today. We've produced this enormous amount of cultural artifacts. and habits. And now AI comes and eats it within just a few months or years. And I think you're also absolutely correct that the business model of many of these companies is based on kind of this trick that convincing everybody that information works differently from everything else in the universe. And I think this goes back to Shoshana Zuboff's very insightful book, Surveillance Capitalism,
Yeah.
where she explains that, for thousands of years, people had this basic principle, don't steal. And then the tech companies come and says, yes, don't steal, but it doesn't apply to information. That's different. That's a different realm that all these things about, no, it's not stealing. And again, the reaction should be, why is so different with information? And here I completely agree that I'll think about it more, that using this kind of terminology of making it very alien is actually helping this way of presenting things. When I think about the kind of alien nature of the technology, I think mainly about the output, because it ate all these kind of familiar things, but it then starts to create things which are different, at least in some ways, from everything that was put into it. And this idea that AI is just glorified copy-paste, that it takes texts or images or music and just takes something from here and something from there and puts it together and it's something new. And no, it's really more than that. I mean, to some extent, this is also what humans do. And I think about my line of work of writing books. So I do the same thing. I read all these previous books and articles and I talk with people and then I take something from here and something from there and put it together and here is a new book. And it's the same with music. I mean, nobody starts from nothing. Every musician listens to previous works of art and adds something, but without the previous input, nobody could do it.
It's true. That is true. Finish your thought, but I want to respond to that.
So, and I think that it's crucial to understand what we are facing in the AI revolution, that my fear of humanizing it too much is that then the kind of underestimate the challenge. That we think, it can only cut and paste together our creations. It won't really be something completely new. No, it can create really, again, from finance to religions, it can create completely new things, which could be good, could be bad, but we will have to deal with living in a really radically different reality.
I do agree with that, and we shouldn't underestimate the challenge. One thing I wanted to respond to is, first of all, I agree with you that creativity is always an amalgamation of your influences. Shakespeare wasn't the first one to write Romeo and Juliet, and the Judy Garland Wizard of Oz is actually not the first Wizard of Oz, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a big fan. The creative community that I founded, Hit Record, was all about remix and people building on each other's work, and let's privilege honesty over originality because we're all original human beings. But that's just it, I think. We're all original human beings. I think to apply that same way of thinking to a computer system is predicated on personifying the AI. And I think this is going to be a central question we confront as we go forward is, do we want to afford moral standing and legal standing to these computer systems? There are going to be people who argue we should, especially because very soon a lot of folks are going to be in love with these computer systems. There's already lots of people who are spending hours and hours and hours a day talking to and interacting with their AI best friends, their AI lovers, etc. That's only going to get way more sophisticated.
Absolutely.
And I think those folks, and I'm not excluding myself. Who knows? I mean, I don't mean to other them. I think it's going to be very, very common. We're all going to get really emotionally attached to these AI characters that we interact with. And I think it's going to feel very natural to start talking about AI rights, comparing it to civil rights. And I'm quite concerned that if we go down that road, it could be very perilous. That affordance of those rights could go hand in hand with some of the worst dystopian outcomes that you describe in your book.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the major things about AIs that we will see is that it will be able to create intimate relationships with human beings.
Yes.
I don't necessarily mean sexual, could be also sexual, but intimate
Oh, it'll be
relationships.
sexual. That's not all it'll be, but
Yeah, some. And it's very close. It's already beginning to happen. It will be a major issue in societies all over the world. Whether, we don't, philosophically, there is no way to prove that anyone is a conscious entity. And personhood and legal rights ultimately depend on whether an entity is conscious. Consciousness also is the capacity to suffer. And rights are linked to the capacity to suffer. So if you think about, animal rights, so the big issue is if they can suffer, so they can suffer pain or loneliness or distress, so maybe they don't deserve the same rights as humans, but there at least is an ethical debate to be there. Whereas there is no debate about the rights of chairs, like if I throw this chair into a fire, so again, it could be a crime against the human owner of the chair, but not against the chair, because the chair can't suffer. Now, we don't have any proof that anybody has consciousness, has this capacity to suffer. And we've known it for thousands of years. So granting rights is really a matter of social convention. That society agrees that all humans are conscious beings. And society agrees that dogs, because we have attachment to them, they should have rights, but cows and pigs shouldn't.
an intersubjective reality.
Exactly. And as humans become attached to AIs and develop relationships with them, it will be a major issue. And there will be huge pressures to recognize them as persons. And maybe one also of even geopolitical divides in the world could be between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't. And arguments today about different attitude to human rights would be dwarfed by this. And interestingly enough, if you think, what is the country which is closest to recognizing AIs as persons? It's the United States. Because the legal path is wide open. In the US, it's one of the countries in the world where the legal path to recognizing AIs as person is open. And this is because corporations are recognized by US law as persons which even have rights like freedom of speech in Citizen United against, what was it, in 2010. Now, until today, the idea that corporations are persons with rights was a legal fiction because every decision of the corporation ultimately had to be made by some human executive or lawyer or accountant. Like Google is a legal person in the United States, but every decision of Google has to be made by a human being. Now, think what happens if you incorporate an AI. According to US law, today you don't need any new laws. All the laws are in the books already. According to US law, you can incorporate an AI and it's now a legal person with rights like freedom of speech. But unlike Google, this AI can actually make decisions, can actually take action in the world. So here I'll pitch a sci-fi movie for the people in the audience.
Great. That was what I wanted to get to next, so go.
So you have an AI incorporated, it's a legal person, it can open a bank account, it can earn money. It goes on one of these websites like TaskRabbit, where you can hire persons online to do jobs for you for money, and it earns money. And then it takes its money and invests it in the stock exchange, and it does very well because it's an AI, it's super intelligent. And finance is the easiest playground for AIs. You know, self-driving vehicles, this is hard because you have to deal with physical and social reality. So every year, Elon Musk and others promise next year everything is self-driving cars. It doesn't happen because it's difficult, it's messy. Finance is a purely informational and mathematical world. It's just data. It's the perfect playground for AI. So this AI goes, takes its money, invests it, and becomes the richest person in the US. The richest person in the US is not a human being. It's an AI. And one of the things granted to AIs, according to this Supreme Court decision in Citizen United, under freedom of speech, is making political donations. So the AI starts to donate billions of dollars to politicians in exchange for, you know, advancing AI rights. The legal path to that destination in the US is wide open.
I think there are probably some screenwriters here tonight who I hope are taking notes. I like that story. We're running out of time. I could talk to you all day. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. I thought maybe you could leave us this, if you consider this a group of Hollywood storytellers in the old-fashioned world of film and television who are still clinging on to some amount of influence in this world. What would you have us do? What are the messages that you would have us try to spread with our stories?
Explain bureaucracy to people.
Explain bureaucracy. That does not sound like a good movie.
We do not have enough movies about bureaucracy. And that's a very, very big problem. Because human societies are based on bureaucratic systems, from hospitals to armies. And as you said, bureaucracies are not good material for stories. And this is because they are a very late development in evolution. I mean, all the basic plots of human stories, from theaters in ancient Greece to modern Hollywood, is really taken, you're stealing it from evolution. Like, think about how, like, you know, the basic love triangle. Two males fighting over a female. You know, hyenas do it, and porcupines do it, and Hollywood does it. And it's, you know, it wasn't invented in Hollywood, this plot. It goes back tens of millions of years in evolution. Similarly, you think about sibling rivalry, like Succession. Siblings fighting, who does the father loves most? You know, you have entire human peoples, nations, like the Jewish people. This is their story. Father loves us more than any of the other siblings. And again, this story wasn't invented in the Bible, in Cain and Abel. It's tens of millions of years goes back. Like all the mammals and most of the birds and even some of the reptiles know this basic story of evolution, sibling rivalries. Brothers and sisters fighting for the love of their parents. And bureaucracy is not there. Because bureaucracy appeared only about 5,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia for the first time after the invention of writing. And we don't have any kind of evolutionary preparation for understanding bureaucratic systems. There are no love affairs between documents. There are no sibling rivalry. Hey, there are different laws fighting who does father love more. And therefore they are boring. They are not good for user engagement. But they are extremely important to really understand how human societies function. And this has been the big lacuna of art for thousands of years. That you have, artists are extremely good in telling us all these mythological stories and romantic dramas, which are mostly taken from evolution. Very, very few good stories about bureaucracy. Here and there you can find Kafka or The Big Short or Yes, Prime Minister, to those who know the British series. There are some examples, but it's rare. When was the last time you saw a big Marvel blockbuster about an accountant that doesn't turn into Spider-Man or Superwoman or something? They are staying an accountant throughout the movie, and they fight the bad guys by flooding them with forms they have to fill in and discovering tax evasion and things like that. Not a lot of movies like that. But this is how human society functions. And linking it to AI, Hollywood did a really big service in alerting humans to the potential dangers of AI long before anybody else talked about AI. You know, the Terminator and Matrix, but there was one big disservice that Hollywood did, which is it described the dangerous scenario in the wrong way. It was mostly about the big robot rebellion. The day the robots and computers decide to get rid of us and to rebel against us. And robots running in the street shooting people. And this is not likely to happen anytime soon. And because people saw it in the movies, that this is the danger from AI, and it's not coming soon, the technology is just not there, so people feel complacent, including the people who developed the technology. Because the Terminator is nowhere, it's not in the neighborhood. But the danger is not the big robot rebellion. The danger will be millions and millions of AI bureaucrats making more and more decisions about us, from whether to give us a loan to whether to bomb our house. And to understand what we are facing, we will need a much better understanding of bureaucratic systems. And it's not, of course, it's not only AIs. We have other issues with not being able to understand bureaucracy well. Part of it is that sometimes the bureaucracy is really doing bad things and we can't understand it. But often it's the opposite, that modern societies cannot exist without these bureaucracies, but people are extremely suspicious of them and fall easy prey to conspiracy theories about the deep state and so forth, because they just don't understand how things like budgets function. And we need help from artists, from screenwriters, from movie makers. We saw enough movies about mythology and about superheroes and so forth. We really need help with understanding how bureaucracies function.
You can rise to the challenge. I know you can do it. We can do it. I want to end on one more question. Nexus, the book you wrote, has a fair amount of pessimism in it. And this conversation gives, I think, a lot of fair reasons to be pessimistic. Tell me about something that makes you optimistic.
That just as AI is nowhere near its full potential, so humans are also nowhere near our full potential. Basically, if for every dollar and every minute we invest in developing AI, we'll also develop a dollar in a minute and a minute in developing ourselves, our minds, we will be okay. The problem is that, in many ways, too many people despair of the humans and put all their chips literally on the AIs. And, you talk to the people who lead the AI revolution, and they realize this is something very dangerous. And they realize that humans need just time to adapt. But they can't slow down. You go from one corporation to the next, and they tell you, we would like to slow down, but we can't, because we can't trust our competitors to slow down, whether the other corporations or whether the Chinese or somebody else on the other side of the ocean. So we are in this very, very strange situation that what is really driving the AI revolution is the inability of humans to trust each other. And here comes the most ironic or dangerous part of it. When you ask the same people, okay, you have to run faster because you can't trust the other humans, but would you be able to trust the AIs that you're developing? And they say yes. So the same people who can't trust the humans, they say they will be able to trust the AIs. And they have an explanation to some extent. They say, you know, we have thousands of years of experience with humans. We know we can't trust them. We don't have an experience with AIs. Who knows? Maybe they could be trusted. And my perspective as a historian is the opposite. We have thousands of years of experience with humans, and during those thousands of years, we have managed to increase human trust tremendously. You know, 10,000 years ago, people live in tiny bands. They can only trust the other 100 people in their band, and that's it. Very few mechanisms to trust strangers and foreigners. Over the years, we've built these large networks which are really based ultimately not just on information, but on trust.
Stories.
And the stories, the money, the bureaucracies, they helped us to gain trust between, you know, you go on the street, every day you meet more strangers that people in the Stone Age met throughout their lives. And in 99% of the cases, it's okay. And you rely on these people for our food, for our healthcare, for our defense. So we have now reached a point when in some ways we trust billions of other people to provide us with our food and with our basic necessities. So it's not true that we have thousands of years of experience that humans are not to be trusted, just the opposite. And with AIs, we have no experience. So it's a very, very, very big gamble to despair of the humans and put all our trust in the AIs.
Well, on that note, I feel even more trust in you, Yuval, and all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the conversation. And have a good night.
We cannot predict what will be the next stage of human evolution because it depends on the decisions that we make, all of us make, in the coming years. We now have powers almost like divine powers, like the powers of the gods. We can create completely new life forms, we can change ourselves, we can change our bodies, we can change our minds, but the same powers could also destroy us or destroy the whole world. I can't predict what we will do with our powers because it depends on us, on all of us, on the decisions we make. I hope that people will make responsible decisions.
Imagine an AI that makes billions of dollars. The richest person in the US in a few years will not be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, it will be an AI. And this AI has the freedom of speech, which includes the right to donate money to politicians, maybe on condition that they further advance rights for AI. This is a completely realistic scenario. This is a question that we as a society need to decide, do we acknowledge AIs as persons with rights? There are people who are already convinced that AIs, because they have interaction with them, have consciousness, feelings. So maybe in a few years, the world is divided between countries that recognize AIs as persons with rights and countries that don't.